video.
Okay, great. So you're gonna prepare all the, with Abby, you're gonna prepare all the, supporting documents that we get for the meeting?
Yep.
Okay, cool, thank you. Nice to meet you, and any other comments, member comments or concerns? Okay, then. We can review the minutes, but we can't approve them.
Actually,
Yeah.
you do not have a quorum, so you're good.
Okay, so how many people are on this committee and how many do we need for a quorum?
So there are 6 people on the committee. You need 4 for a quorum.
Okay.
Bill just texted. He's not going to be attending the meeting, so he's officially
Bill,
absent.
Ariel, Eric, Chris, Eva, Rob. Bill, Ariel, Chris. Eric, Eva, Rob. Okay. And we've got 4 of us here. 1, 2,
Yep.
3, 4. Okay, good. So, do we have a chance to review the minutes from last week? Does anybody have any comments on the minutes or revisions? Susan Brock especially, I know you're a careful minutes
Rob, I
reader.
think you saw last week I sent, yeah. Yeah, Rob, I think you saw maybe last week I emailed some typo corrections and there was just a correction on voting. It showed for one of the votes that you had abstained when you had actually voted in favor of, I think it
So
was
Oh, I
approval
see.
of a set of minutes. So that was it.
is the one that we have in our packet the corrected version?
No.
No,
So traditionally what happens is if Susan sends minutes in advance of the mail out, then
Okay.
we will put something in red line as corrected minutes for the mail out so the committee has a chance to see them. But otherwise, she just reports, she'll email it to everyone and then she'll just report it at the meeting. If there's something substantive, she'll bring it up, just like with you, if there's anything substantive. Otherwise, if it's just typos, traditionally what happens is someone will just email Abby and I and just say, hey, I have a couple typos. So,
Okay. Okay. So, is there a motion to approve the minute?
Also move. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay. And
unanimous.
the next item on the agenda is to review the 2023 Codes and Ordinances Committee Work Plan. And, maybe CJ, maybe lead that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. So, this was an opportunity to step back and say, and look at our comprehensive plan, which Dan did a great job looking back at our implementation and also talking with other department heads. Had the opportunity to speak with Dan Tate, Director of Engineering, as well as Joe Slater, Director of Public Works, and of course, Marty. And as well as staff, we talked about essentially of the list of and of course, Susan, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Susan, attorney for the town, of course, also got to weigh in and we looked at both the comprehensive plan, what had been implemented so far, what our goals were broadly, and then what had been kind of lingering on the planning work plan list for some time. And we came up it was pretty unanimous on tackling subdivision regulations as one of our highest priorities. You'll see tonight in further detail, Dan has put together a presentation on some of the background, history, philosophy, and how we intend to approach this. And this seemed like something we could certainly shall we say, subdivide and conquer in this year. And so, we did a lot of thinking on this work plan. Now we understand that this is ambitious and, perhaps institutional zoning will kind of fit along in these pieces, but we've developed a pretty, I'd say comprehensive, but also somewhat cursory scope of work, for this particular project to just lay out essentially, what our thoughts were on this. So, I had met with, Rob, Town Supervisor, Ron Howe, as well as, Deputy Supervisor, Rich Paulo. And we went through this work plan, talked about, the strengths of this committee and the fact that we were making some big changes. And we said, okay, I think it's, we're on our way, with, essentially developing a work plan that then codes and ordinances can have for some time, to come. So we know that's unlikely that all of this would be completed in this year, of course, given that we're headed almost into Q3. But in any event, this was pretty well examined by staff, and I think it comes with pretty strong scope of work, or at least an initial scope of work that we'd like to discuss with you tonight.
I'm curious why you mentioned that we're almost into Q3. Was it kind of a different calendar?
No, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking Memorial Day is imminent, and it's.
Oh, that's true.
You know.
Look at it that way. Q3 is coming up pretty
I
fast.
think I'm just the planner
Yeah.
of me talking, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, these are essentially just little clips notes, type, it's a very short and brief background, and then for each project, we always develop a scope of work and deliverables and timelines, and, we're trying to do this in a way that's fairly expeditious, but that also is really mindful of the committee's time and commitment, and also, demands on, staff, especially engineering, public works, code enforcement, and planning, who are gonna play the largest role in helping us develop this, so.
So that's very interesting, the work plan, and I guess we can go through it and kind of look through it, but, just to help me and maybe everybody understand, how many people does the town have working on planning, and who are they? And when you bring in engineering people, like how often does that happen? And is there like a full-time engineer who just does planning? Like what's the lay of the land for resources available here?
That's a really good question, and we, probably, I don't know if you could bring that up, Dan, but, on the main, drive, maybe you could just Google our, Town of Ithaca 2023 budget. And there's an organizational chart, within the budget.
Let's see.
It may be easier to find than that,
That
but,
comes up like research and-
2023 Town of Ithaca budget, it should, I think. Thanks for looking, Dan. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, it has to do town of Ithaca, New
I've
York.
seen I've seen the budget.
Well, now it's
The,
what city of it.
we were talking about a chart, you said?
There you go. Yeah, just a org chart, so you can kind of see. Yeah, so you can see kind of just in, and if you could search, I can't remember what page it's on. Which I
So
should know off the top
Susan,
of my head.
do you need us to share the screen, or are you okay with just not seeing what Dan pulled up?
It's fine. You don't have to share it.
All right,
We're just gonna try to see that.
we're just
org
looking at
chart.
the budget.
It's page 15,
Riveting.
Dan, if you would.
15.
Thank you.
Okay.
Although,
this is-
actually, now that I'm thinking about it, since this is being recorded and will be put on YouTube for the public to watch at a later time, it might be useful for them to see what you're seeing. So, while I personally didn't need to see it, maybe you do want to share your screen
Not the
via
carrot.
Zoom so that the public can see it on the recording.
The share screen.
All right.
You got
This is- Yeah, muscle memory is.
Nope,
You've got it.
That's not it.
That's not it?
nope,
Oh,
stop sharing for a moment.
okay, let's
That Google one there.
It's the one,
see.
You
that
got it.
one. Yeah.
Nope. it's right here.
Okay, that one, okay. Share, here we go, okay. And
So you could just, X that one out, or
let's
you just
go
minimize that
get
one.
rid of that. And
Just
minimize that,
Minimize.
minimize that.
Your screen is right there at the bottom there. See the green
Oh,
outline
yeah,
there?
that's
Just have to pull
right.
that
There
up.
we go.
You got it.
All right, it's just, like I said, it's muscle memory that
Okay,
I'm not that
So page 15.
15.
And there you go. This gives you just a kind of a
Okay.
That's
flavor of what we're talking about
here's
here.
the organization, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah. So this gives you a
Yeah,
sense of,
let me go back to, let's just do that and go to the page number like that.
okay, perfect.
Okay, and we'll go down to planning.
So here we are.
So.
And so, just as a kind of a broad understanding of the core functions of the department. So, Director of Planning, of course, oversees all of these, incredible array of, functions, including, you know, everything from, just broadly conservation to, the built environment, developments, infrastructure, utilities, transportation, you name it, right? Our two senior planners, I think you could think of them as being balanced, kind of the flip side of the same coin. Dan, who we have here tonight, of course, is focused on coding and the built environment. So he is really exclusive to almost this committee, you could say, and other types of code writing initiatives. And feel free to add any additional color commentary.
Purely, comp planning, urban design, that kind of thing. So more of the built environment guy.
Okay,
And then, of course, you have Mike Smith, and he's kind of the flip side. He is conservation, recreation, trails, parks, so.
that's his sort of his purview. That's all breaks out between,
It's kind of a,
and, I'm terrible with names and meeting people a few times. But,
yeah,
Dan,
exactly.
who is the conservation planner?
That's Mike Smith.
Mike Smith.
Mhm.
I definitely met him a few times at like openings of parks and stuff.
Yes, yes. He
Public
does.
Works meetings, I think.
Yeah. So
He
for
comes to
instance.
Public Works meetings, right?
Yes, exactly. And so because there's such a strong tie there with Parks and Recreation, he tends to attend or is our liaison for Public Works, but he's involved in a host of different initiatives, including things like deer management as well. And then, of course, we have our dedicated planner.
It's true, I'm very dedicated.
You're the planner, okay, just one of her, just one planner.
That's correct. And
Okay.
Chris is.
So many
has the
personalities.
enormous task of coordinating all development review for the town and is also specializes in environmental review for basically every board that could possibly want environmental review and need that.
At the town.
That's right, that's right, at the time, which seems like it could encompass the whole world, but,
Yeah,
and, of course, our sustainability planner, that's Hillary Swartwood. I don't know if
I
any
don't
of
think
you
I've met,
have had a chance to meet her yet, but she's, Nick Goldsmith has, gone to, Park Foundation,
Yeah,
of course,
really smart.
still in our orbit, of course, but,
So, she's a planner also, along with Chris.
that's correct, yeah.
We are all
Planning
planners.
We're all planners.
We all can do the functions that each other does. We're all qualified, we just
You
specialize.
specialize in different roles and
Mhm.
projects. Okay,
It's a really
and
good
then,
question.
the administrative assistant for planning department is Abby.
Okay, absolutely.
Abby's the most
Our
important
Abby is,
member of the team.
makes.
And is she on
phenomenal
these
role.
meetings, is she on the meetings too? Is she-
She's on this meeting right now. We've talked about whether she would just, continue to take minutes after the meeting or whether we want her to attend. We're kind of still in
So
transition.
she,
trying to-
is she the minutes taker?
I guess she is. She provides the minutes. yeah.
Hi, Abby. That's important, that's an important job.
Oh, yes.
What goes in the minutes and how it's put in.
Abby does, a broad range of administrative functions from, preparing minutes to posting on the website to distributing packets, organizing the mailings, FOIL requests. I mean, I could go on and on
Okay.
and on.
Okay,
But in any event, the additional assistants we have are the folks we would also like to make sure are included are, at least in weighing in on the drafts, our Director of Code Enforcement is right
we
here,
have
which is
long
very
experience
convenient.
together from the zoning.
Exactly.
I must say.
And our Director of Engineering, Dan Tate, he would be involved in reviews, and obviously he could assign different portions, say, of different code sections to review to his designee or staff as assigned. And then, of course, our Superintendent of Public Works, Joe Slater.
Okay,
And he would certainly be invited always to comment. We want to make sure we're getting as robust feedback as we possibly can.
right. Okay. So thanks for talking me through that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and then, Was helpful. So should we, discuss the item on the work plan or just launch into the next item on the agenda tonight, which is to, it's review the scope of work for the subdivision regulations.
If you had any questions or comments on the work plan, we're happy to make those amendments as you see fit. It's not meant to be really an adopted plan per se. It's meant to just kind of guide our work here today.
You know, I have to say I have a lot of curiosity about it, but again, I'm also very interested in this kind of thing and very interested in stormwater management and erosion and sediment control. Like I'm kind of curious, where that's going, but in the interest of keeping things moving, we can just move on to the next item on the agenda, because I don't have any questions. Does anybody else have questions on the work plan? Is it pretty self-explanatory, or you want any more details on it? Anybody? Everybody good? So the next item on the agenda is, let's see, let's review the subdivision of land regulations. So this is just a work plan. This isn't the actual code.
No.
That's correct. This is, so with well, it's funny that you ask, because in everything we do in planning, we try to either understand whether it's a program, so a continuing investment, right, or whether it's a project, right? So to us, projects have a couple notable pieces to them. We try to be very clear about our objective, why we're undertaking the project, right? We try to be somewhat clear with some milestones and deliverables, so that the committee knows what to expect and when, and what revisions would be expected from you, what kind of time commitment, as well as other resources, right? What kind of budget would we need? Do we need outside help? Do we need help from other departments? And we try to, put this all together in a way that we look out and try to essentially forecast when we might be able to complete it. And so this is essentially a first attempt at a brief subdivision of land. We invited all the parties that we just looked on the organizational chart to provide comments and feedback on that, and that really helped us further refine this for your reading. So this is marked draft essentially until this committee sees fit to move this from a draft to an accepted scope of work. But before that, and we can also provide some additional flavor and background that might be more interesting. Dan has prepared a presentation about this particular topic, subdivision of lands, and we'd like to show you kind of our thinking at maybe a bit higher level.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that'd be wonderful.
All right, let's get this started up, and then I have to share the screen. I'll do that. And share, and let me just blow that up, and let's see, there's the slideshow. All right, no, not that one. Come on. Slideshow, there we go. Okay, let's start. Okay, here we go. What we're talking about is when you talk about the subdivision code, it's this guy here. Chapter 234 of the town of Ithaca, just our general town code, our municipal code that deals with subdivision of land. And I'll go back here. So let's talk about what subdivision regs do for a little bit. I'm going to say that I don't have a script for this. I don't have long, boring slides where I read all the bullet points and talk in a drone here, but subdivision regulations serve a somewhat different function than zoning regulations. Basically, it's just how land is subdivided, how lots are arranged, how streets are arranged, how open space is arranged, and so on. Your typical subdivision code, really, there's gonna be two major parts to it. There's going to be part that deals with neighborhood design or subdivision design, as you know, what's on the ground, how are the lots arranged, what are you going to have for streets, where are utilities going to go, and so on. And then there's an administrative aspect, that's, if you have a 2-lot subdivision, how do you do that? If you have a boundary line change, what's the process for that? If we've got a much larger subdivision, how are we going to do that? And this presentation is mainly focusing on, the results of a subdivision, as what happens on the ground. There's still a lot that we have to change with the administrative process, it's like with the review, the approval process, but gonna focus on the outcome of this is what our subdivision rates have ended up, giving us here. So, but it's like lot layout, shape, location, timing of lot development. That's a more of an administrative function, construction adequacy of facilities like roads, parks, so on. How subdivision integrates in the surrounding area, how roads connect, how utilities connect, overall the impact on existing utilities, protecting resources, possibly, streams, views and so on. And then compatibility with zoning and community plans, that your lot sizes can comply with what's allowed in the underlying zone district, everything else. So what are subdivision, ultimately shapes larger pattern of the built environment, implements some of our goals regarding what we want to see for the built environment, natural environment, and ensure land is developed and used wisely and efficiently. That it is a precious resource. We're not making any more of it, so we have to be careful about how we use it. Now you see there's little frowny faces. There's a sad face and kind of an indifferent face. And that indifferent face is saying, okay, well, our code does shape the larger pattern and form of development. It doesn't exactly do it in a way that our comp plan, even the plan before, has envisioned that it would be done. Doesn't really implement our planning policies, goals, best practices, and really it resulted in efficient land use. So let's go on. So subdivision regs, if you take a look at the date in here, says they were adopted in 1956. So there's been various revisions since then, major revisions, minor revisions, and so on. But the foundation of this code is 77 years old, about kind of as old as this movie here. And then, was written really, got concerned, what was Ithaca like in the 1950s?
Where'd you get that photograph?
Oh, we have digital, like aerial photos of the town that go back.
That's
pretty far.
We have a bunch of them, and also Cornell's Digital Archives has a bunch of aerial photos to look at. And this is, what area of the town is this?
It's northeast Ithaca, so.
Yeah,
We're
so,
looking up here, that's Trip Hammer Road, and going
And then
down
Warren
Warren Road,
the
going
corners.
to
Yep.
Henshaw, I think would be down here. So.
right, that's Community Corners, just
Community
above the word
Corners,
northeast.
right here.
Yep,
So
and that's 1954.
1954, and this is what Ithaca was like in 1954.
Yeah, that's
It was
interesting. A
mostly-
lot with my house on it is in that picture.
Oh, it is.
Something else is there. That was a farm. It's like a fruit and berry farm.
Quite a few farms.
Things have changed a lot since 1954, and those old rules now, they really haven't caught up with really the town's needs right now. So, but they said, first off, it allows frontage subdivision, rural residential strip development. That's a problem, especially along county roads, town roads, state roads, and outlying rural areas. And
Frontage subdivision.
a frontage subdivision is when you see these old farms or these larger lots, and they just had little pieces cut out of them through the years.
Mhm.
So you'll see like this might have been one big lot at one time, one big farm lot. But there have been 4 little lots that have been cut off. This one has 7 lots that have been cut off through the years. And the problem with that is, these areas, they've been zoned for really, like rural residential, agriculture, sometimes conservation. But what they're doing is like the land that want to see, that we consider to be rural character, the land that we want to conserve. Really, it's going to be out of sight, out of mind behind all these houses. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're privatizing that rural character. We're taking it out of the public realm from the street. And it's putting it so that only, once we continue cutting off these little lots every so often, incrementally over time, only the people that live along these busy streets will enjoy it, be able to enjoy it. There's a lot of other different reasons for why this isn't an ideal pattern of development, but when you're going down, let's say Mecklenburg Road, it's a landscape that's not exactly urban, it's not suburban, it's not rural. What is it? It's just, it's sprawl. Also allows indiscriminate use of flag lots. Now, flag lots are something of a necessary evil, among planners and, in subdivision codes, but they're really meant to be used only on occasions when there's no other options that are available. That's the only way you can subdivide land. Like you might have some kind of like natural resource limitation or awkward shaped lot and.
Dan, can you explain what a flag lot is?
Yeah, I'll explain a flag lot. Thank you.
I see one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them over here. They're all highlighted. If you don't know what a flag lot is shaped like a flag. So over here is long narrow pole. And there's the flag. I mean, granted, these are highlighted. They're not necessarily flag lots, but it gives you an idea that here was one larger lot at one time. It's been cut up into 4 smaller lots. But in the town, often what that flag lots have been used to avoid building roads. So instead of having a road that might go up and through the property, the landowner, the developer will cut up into these flag shaped lots with little narrow access points for the driveway. Sometimes you don't even see the driveway going up the access point. It's just so that the lot has access to the public right of way for state law. And of course, the problems with that, many. First off, like with frontage development, one thing I forgot to mention is with frontage subdivision is that the town, the county, the state is actually subsidizing that type of development because we put in the roads. The road, it's a county road, it's a town road, it's a state road. Somebody who subdivides that doesn't have to put in roads. Same thing with a flag lot that, another development, anywhere else, in Deer Run, whatever other subdivision is out there, the developer had to build the roads. When you cut up into frontage lots or flag lots, you're not building any roads. So in a way, we're subsidizing that type of pattern. These lots are very difficult to serve, very difficult to find for emergencies. Very difficult to re-subdivide should the need happen in the future, should this area be, further urbanized, let's say, 60, 70, 80 years from now.
They also often require area variances from the zoning board.
Right.
As well as subdivision
Yeah.
approval from the planning
Right.
board, because you need a certain amount of frontage along the
Right,
highway.
they need an area variance for that. Yeah, I have a question about this picture here.
Yeah,
What circumstances caused the developer of that lot in the middle to put a road in to serve all the lots? And then like the 2 shaded lots on either side were subdivided without a road in the middle. So what,
Yeah,
how
that-
come the one developer
that's
has a
a
road?
good question.
it's a good question.
That's an older subdivision, and it either happened before our time here, or, we didn't review it, it was a different planner or planning director that reviewed that subdivision, so I don't have the history off the top of my head.
Is it possible that the planning board require the road as a condition of, at some point?
It's
I mean, there never
possible,
was a
it's
vote.
also possible that that road was intended to be extended at some point to connect with another road to the north. But
You
it
never know.
wasn't, so, yeah, so we would have to do a little bit more research on the history of it, but, and I don't have that information right
They
now.
did have like a little weird trail at the top there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
when I looked at it, they said something about that.
Like this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you go off to the right, there's like a little,
Right, yeah, so the shaded subdivision
This one.
was a subdivision that was approved just a few years ago by the planning board. And that road extends into a town pathway
Yeah.
that is on one side of behind West Haven Road. So it goes into a natural area that's that was a town natural area. It's awkward. It's an awkward situation with an awkward history.
Yeah. What happens, but generally it's just. Human nature, you want to subdivide and develop your land as cheaply as possible, and we don't have standards that say you can't do it this way.
Mhm.
So that's why it's done this way.
When was that other lot division approved?
Over.
The
this
one over here, that one was approved just a few years ago as well,
Okay.
and the developer's justification for that lot arrangement was, I believe, related to topography. But again, I would have to look that up as well.
Mhm.
Mhm. Would there have been anything that would have prevented them from putting in a small access road to go back and?
Probably not, but if
Right.
he, but, there were several scenarios that the developer talked with with town staff about, and,
Mhm.
this was the least problematic scenario that I'm going to the planning board.
But, flag lots though are less than ideal, and if you look at. If you look at, Tompkins County GIS and you look at. The pattern of parcels in the town, you'll see an awful lot of flag lots here. Also, flag lot, it's something that it isolates you from the streetscape. From the larger street, from your neighbors, and yeah, sure, there might be some people that like that isolation, but when you have so many. Flag lots, it's not always a choice to buy a house with a flag lot. I live in a house that it's something of a flag lot. I'll show you a little bit later on. It's not quite as bad as these, but it's just because, there's, so many of them that, sometimes, it's a big part of the market. And not by, since because of the buyer, it's because the developers are doing this. So, yeah, do you have something, Chris, or?
No,
Okay.
just some more examples of awkward.
Yeah,
lots, lot
Awkward,
shapes for different
awkward lot
reasons.
shapes, and this is an area where, it's. A lot of subdivision regulations now have a requirement that lots be shaped as close to a rectangle as possible, that lot lines be as parallel to or perpendicular to the road as possible, that the shape of the lot be, close to like a 1:3 or 1:4 ratio. And a lot of that is so that you don't have wasted land in the back, that it's easier to consolidate lots or re-subdivide in the future. But here, there's been no kind of master planning for any of these what might have been larger lots in the past. I'd have to look back at older maps to see what was original here, but oftentimes this is a case where it's been like one awkward slice cut off and then another one and another one over 40, 50, 60
Yeah,
years.
that one at the top there, is that where you have your arrow?
Yeah.
That's really something.
Yeah, this is a really, I don't know what happened here. I think I'm gonna say if it's anything, might have been the zoning at a time, had a minimum lot size and to try to meet the lot size requirements,
Oh.
they did something like that. I mean, I've seen that is done in some other communities that,
Oh, to meet frontage.
yeah, or possibly in frontage, who knows?
What streets are those?
This is East King Road and, let's see, East King Road and that is. I think if that's, might be Troy. Troy or Cottington, one or the other,
Oh,
so.
so. It looks like.
Yeah, I live
Burns, right?
just a little bit north. I mean,
Yeah,
And that's Burns Road, maybe?
right
Oh, then it's probably Cottage.
up here.
yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of.
that's Cottington. So, and another example of awkward lot shapes are what planners call bowling alley lots, and these long, narrow lots that. You know, the backland, what are you going to do with it? It makes it very difficult for resource conservation, for, you know, if you're going to re-subdivide in the future, thing like that. And another example is that, I'm gonna get to this in a little bit, is that most of this land here is zoned MDR.
So that's
15,000 square foot lots.
sizes.
Right,
What, you know what streets those are?
this is
That's Sladeville Road.
Slaterville and.
I believe that's Thomas Lane.
Honestly.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yep. You know, that is,
Tom Lane.
Land, yeah.
And then on the east side, it's the Eastern Heights neighborhood.
Yeah, so getting older, so the names don't exactly come as quickly, but these are often, you know, like, you know, 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre lots in an area, and get to that in a little bit, like the inefficient land use. Again, that's Northeast Ithaca. Got MDR zoning, 15,000 square foot lots, but these are mostly 30,000 square foot lots, often an acre, often an acre.
You know what
and a
I
half.
heard the reason for that was when it was laid
Yeah.
out, there was no sewer. And the
Right.
lots had to be big enough to support septic.
Yeah.
That's, that, I mean, that's
That
the
makes
reason for
sense.
that
Yeah.
particular, those particular lots being so big.
Right.
But I don't know if that's true or not, because there are sewer easements and sewers that go
Yeah.
through there now.
Yeah, I heard
That
about,
came later.
yeah, I heard about drainage too, that,
Northeast is
It was-
notorious for drainage issues.
It doesn't drain, it's naturally like a wet surface.
Yeah, and
Right.
there was not
Except
proper
for woods.
drainage put in when
No.
a lot of the subdivisions were
Right.
done.
but you know.
As the ones who live there could probably attest.
Yeah,
There's no
Cigarette
stormwater, there's no stormwater management.
Yeah, it becomes difficult.
right. You know, another problem with the subdivision code, at least back in the old days, and, you know, if it was, you know, so there were issues with soils, if there were, you know, if it was septic back then really, you know, it should have been, you know, it should have been zoned for, you know, like LDR, or
Yeah.
what would have been called, what, R30 back then?
Yep.
Or, yeah, for 30,000 square foot lots rather than smaller lots, but this is an area that's near Cornell University and, you know, there's high demand for, you know,
What
land
streets are
nearby.
those now?
But you know, this again, this is
They're
Northeast
around there.
Ithaca. I'm trying to think of the name of these streets,
Okay.
but it's still, you know, off of Hanshaw Road.
Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, Dan Tate explained to me, we own property in the Northeast and,
Yeah,
some more people wanna like cover the ditch in front of their house and put a pipe in. And some people have done it. It makes like parking in front of your house and stuff. But, they're not approving it anymore because the ditches, the open ditches are the stormwater retention.
Mhm.
And once you start putting a pipe in instead, the water just flows somewhere else instead of soaking in.
right,
Creates a
So,
problem for the
The
neighbors.
stormwater management is open ditches.
yeah.
It doesn't seem likely to change.
No, and that's something else I'm gonna bring up too. But over here, you know, we've got all this back lot area, again, you know, long, narrow lots that are really deep. And, you know, I can understand you might want some privacy from your neighbor, but you really need, you know, 500 feet of woodland in your backyard. Why it was subdivided this way, again, it might have been because of stormwater, but might have been because land was a lot cheaper back then. So even if the zoning said 15,000 square foot lots, well, you could get away with 30,000 and still make a profit because
Roads,
this was, yeah.
building roads are as expensive and you
Right.
have bigger lots, you need fewer roads.
All right, so you do this. Unfortunately, the thing is that we, you know, when we say 15,000 square foot lots in the zoning code, there's a reason for that, because the comp plan envisions higher density development in that area.
Right,
And, you know, envisions a lot more people. We want to see growth happen here. And when we subdivide with much larger lots, well, all that's going to do is push growth out to outlying areas.
So
So
what's the best way to utilize that backlot space?
that's something that we're gonna come up, we're gonna tell you about next month.
now we've got you calling.
Now I'm curious.
Yeah. So open space, okay, I'm gonna point the arrow here. This is my house right here.
Right, this is part of the
So,
Westwood
yeah.
Hills subdivision.
Oh, what
That
street?
was
Wolf Lane?
That was
Wolf Lane,
supposed to be a clustered subdivision and the whole idea was, and this was in the, I wanna say it was approved in 1990. Maybe a little earlier.
Yeah, a little like, yeah.
And it was before I got here, but, the intent was that it would create these cute little cottage areas where people would, there would be 3 little houses in a little cluster and all the neighbors would get to know each other and life would be great. But you can see what's happened on the south side of that, the road where the arrows is cluster subdivision is people who have purchased the properties decide to purchase 2 of the properties instead of just 1, and you end up losing the whole little clustered feel, and you end up with these really weird looking lots. So that's what happened here.
Yeah, and this is the dedicated open space. This is a town park.
Yeah,
But it's hidden behind backyards. It was, I guess apparently at one time there was the idea that there would be a trail that would come down through here. The town of Ulysses boundary is just a little bit to the north, and the trail would continue down and over and eventually to the south. And this was, I guess, was around before Black Diamond Trail, anybody was thinking about that. But that land, that open space, it's hidden, it's in an area that really can't be patrolled by police. You know, there's a concept called crime prevention through environmental design. CPTED. And for parks, you want to have ideally a lot of frontage on a public road, because that also, this is a public park too.
right, you want it to
And-
be shared amongst
Right.
all of the neighbors, and this is a
Right.
perfect example of what not to do
Yeah,
Yeah.
with your open space requirement in a
Right.
clustered
Yeah,
subdivision.
because all it is, it ends up becoming part of, you know, functionally, it's an
It's that
extended
guy's
backyard. And you can see there's, you know, some encroachment back from whoever lives here. I don't know who lives here, you know, they're my neighbor.
They're right next door.
They're right next door. The people that live in this cluster, we call it the hippie cluster. Because these are the folks that don't mow their lawns and, you know, they let their driveway turn to dirt and it's. So, but everybody else, they're pretty good about keeping up their property. There's somebody that lives there, you know, they walk their dog up and down and our dog doesn't like men. So, you know, it's
Moving
like,
on.
moving on anyhow. It's like, yeah, that's a little bit of like next door drama.
Yeah.
Try not to do that, but,
You live in close proximity.
exactly. What's interesting too is that there's also the gray for a road that was supposed to be,
Uh-huh.
that was supposed to go up through here, and there was supposed to be the
Yeah, I think-
clusters that were going to go.
yeah, I think it was supposed to be Westwood Hills Phase 2
Yeah,
or something.
Right, that never happened, but that's Wolf Lane Park today. That's a town park.
It's like Tick Central.
Yeah.
It is.
Figured that.
Oh my God. I really, you know, I'm pretty much spraying Love Canal on my legs whenever I'm going to mow the lawn, because I don't know what's, you know, what's a little bit further back. So, and for the interconnectivity is an issue also. Ideally, you want to see like an area like this, there's no at the end of this cul-de-sac on Saunders Road into Deer Run.
Mhm.
There should at least be a pedestrian connection, if
Mhm.
not a road connection.
Right.
But code doesn't doesn't require it. Most codes will say, you have to have stub out roads, provide connections wherever possible, connect to stub out roads wherever they exist, but no connection here. And these were both developed, I guess, back in late eighties.
Yeah. There were a series of subdivisions that were approved by the town in the eighties that we would never really approve now. There was something in our subdivision regulations and in our regulations in the eighties where I'm not sure what the decision-making justification was. for some of the
Yeah,
projects.
yeah.
Deer
Standards
runs
are always
one.
changing, what people
Yeah.
want and what people think is good.
Yeah, and this was considered a clustered subdivision because there's some dedicated open space and an
But this is-
HOA
but
that
this
that
is
deals
the,
with the open space.
This is the open space. Again, you're looking at these, at least there's a little bit of street frontage here, but
No, those
You're
are
looking at
very
these-
small,
back.
Those are townhouse units,
right, and
yeah.
each one owns the footprint of their house.
Right, the
Right.
footprint is a little bit of the front, a little bit of the back,
Oh,
and
is-
then
is it
there's
more than-
unfenced.
Wait, isn't that open space like on a hill?
Yeah,
too?
it's on a
A little
slope.
bit,
Slope, yeah, it's not
it's not
very.
horrible.
And then another question,
Yeah,
at the end of the where's the connection arrow,
yeah,
there's a strip, there's a few lots that form a long strip there.
right.
What's that?
It belongs to the town of Ithaca, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a walkway, it's a pathway.
It is a walkway, and then it goes into that big
Where?
odd shaped lot on the
Okay.
road.
Yeah, from where, it looks like it leads from
That's
a
actually
pile to.
It's another park area.
At Saunders Park, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they put in a play structure there and a nice little parking lot recently.
Where, you mean at the bottom end of it there, buddy?
Was
Yeah.
it
At the bottom end of it there where.
that kind of odd shaped lot that's
Yeah,
open?
okay.
with
Yeah.
pile of gravel, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then
It
it looks
looks
like there's
better
a
if
walkway where you could walk through people's backyards, although I don't know why you would want to.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
problem with these types of parks, run through the behind backyards, people think that they're walking through my backyard.
Right.
They, and even then, as a user of a park like that, you don't exactly feel comfortable, you feel like you're like invading somebody else's
Well, the
space.
one thing was a rec trail that went somewhere, but that just loops around and goes back out to the road,
Yeah,
so it's really weird.
I think they've done recent improvements up there on trails, and expanding their trails, but I don't know exactly. You'd have to loop in Joe Slater and Dan Tate on that, but I know that they have been over the past couple of years, been working on trails in those areas, and expanding those for walkability purposes.
Yeah, whole history behind this. This was originally going to be one of the nation's earliest traditional neighborhood developments. Chase Pond, it was designed by Andres Swaney and Elizabeth Lady Cyber. And this was just maybe about a year or 2 years after they built, at least Celebration was built down in Florida, which was considered to be, not Celebration, Seaside. It's considered to be one of the very first T&D or new urbanist projects. But then, the recession hit, the savings and loan crisis of the late eighties hit, and I guess some partners in this, they had financial
Pulled out.
issues, so
Hmm.
they pulled out, and a few years later, conventional subdivision went in, so we almost had T&D in.
Which is,
the late
it's just a more dense,
Yeah.
mixed use type of a project.
What do
Yeah.
you call it, what?
Traditional neighborhood
Traditional
development.
neighborhood development, it's a planning term.
Right,
Right, and just to let you know, like with all this, the new neighborhood code, which guides development of traditional neighborhood development in the town, it has its own subdivision regulations that are separate from the town subdivision regulations. So we don't have any standards or specifications for street improvements, sometimes they're in a subdivision code, sometimes. And, they're in a different part of a town code or municipal code. They'll tell you, okay, if you're building a road, the concrete or the asphalt has to be this thick and it has to be on such and such a base and your sidewalks have to be 4 inches of concrete on such and such a base and everything about, what kind of materials are gonna be used, for the curbs, all of that stuff. We don't have that. We just have one recommended, kind of suggested specification for roads. that is a rural profile. Here's a 22 foot wide, roadway,
I think
You know,
Susan.
yeah.
Susan might be trying to say.
Okay,
something.
Susan, I'm sorry.
I do know that Public Works does have specs for road construction, if that's what you're talking about, when developers are
Yeah.
building roads. They do have specifications for, the different layers and the thicknesses of the layers. Maybe you're talking about something else, but
They
there
have
are some
one.
specifications. It's not that there are none.
They have one and hasn't been officially adopted. My understanding, it's not part of the town code and it's for a rural profile type road. So just, the 22 foot wide road with shoulders and ditches. So, and that's it.
No, they do impose different layers as you go down depth. I know they do.
Right,
So
I mean, they
just-
do for construction, they have, on that sheet. They have recommendation for, okay, the asphalt has to be this thick and on this type of a base. But, it's not officially adopted and it's just that one type, again, one size fits all, regardless of context.
Well, it sounds like there's room for improvement on that.
There's a lot more room for improvement. The problem is when you have the application of the one size fits all. You end up with rural style roads anywhere. There's some roads that in the town that, do have gutters, some of that is negotiated. But this is pretty much what the standard calls for right now, and Saunders Road and that little cul-de-sac that we saw. It's a suburban context area, single family houses in a suburban environment. But no sidewalks, no tree lawns, it's just ditches and swales. And here's one of the issues that you have when you don't have curbs is that you get water infiltration coming in from the sides and pavement will break up from the outside going in. So a little bit different, just not too far away in suburban Rochester road design. If you go in a subdivision, it'll be a little bit different. You'll see gutters, you might see a tree lawn, you might see a sidewalk, you may or may not. CJ's a little more familiar with the ins and outs of suburban Rochester than me, so she could tell you more about that. But so just to say, in Ithaca, it doesn't have to be a, one size fits all rural profile for everything. I'm more familiar with Buffalo and in the inner ring suburbs and a couple of the second ring suburbs, this is Lancaster. It's not exactly known for being a hotbed of progressive planning, but in their suburban areas, you see, street, you're going to see like an 8-foot or 12-foot tree lawn. You're going to see 5-foot sidewalks on both sides, concrete. You're going to see street trees. You're going to see curbs. And this is something that is being done in upstate New York. This isn't we don't do this in New York State kind of thing. This is something that we do here. Not going to say that all areas in Ithaca don't have sidewalks. I mean, here there was, kind of an attempt that was kind of made on Larissa Lane.
Where is Larissa Lane again?
That is off of Danby Road.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah, it's the Westview subdivision.
That's right.
Shingle Road.
But again, because we don't have the standards for, we only have the standards for very low density, settings for rural roads. We don't really, in a more suburban setting, oftentimes, there's negotiation between a developer and Public Works Engineering about what type of road is going to be put in. They don't have much to go on except this one sheet with a rural profile that really hasn't been, formally adopted into town law.
Yeah, and you're sort of at the mercy of the developers to comply or not comply, and
Right.
this particular developer is a perfect example of what we never want to see again.
This
Yeah.
one here.
This particular development, the way that this was designed.
That's atrocious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really big, but if your road is private, you say, well, I'm not gonna dedicate it to the public, it's gonna be a private road. There's no standards except we gotta be able to get emergency vehicles down, and that's it. Most new subdivision codes, even older subdivision codes will say private roads have to meet either some kind of minimum standard, or they have to comply with the same standard as a public road. Our town subdivision regulations don't have that. It's just, can an emergency vehicle get down that road? So here we're looking at Annabelle, it's a
It's
That's
a
all.
little more than just traversing down the road. There's
Yeah.
a weight capacity requirement.
Right, a little bit of
Fire
that,
code,
right.
fees.
Yeah.
There's a little more than just
Right,
get it down.
yeah, the fire engine can't get stuck in it, but there's some gravel roads that are in the town that, that were, this isn't the only one. There's others throughout the town, private roads that are gravel, that,
Wait, wasn't that road there prior to the subdivision? though?
Yes.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was an access from New York State Department of Transportation,
Yeah.
and it
And
went,
the DEC.
yeah,
Yeah,
and to like a limo company
yeah,
at the end.
And this is off of 5 Mile Drive.
But we're looking at, even that Eco Village, you're looking at hundreds of units, and it was a gravel road that went in. And supposedly they did it because of rural character, but many issues with gravel roads, and one thing is, what's called fugitive dust. You drive up and down the road, and it's going to pick up a lot of dust and add to airborne particulate pollution. Plus, there's maintenance problems, and one thing with private roads, my experience has been whenever there's in an HOA, if you have a private road, let's say it's substandard, eventually, the HOA might be dysfunctional. They can't pay to maintain the road, so they'll go, hey, town of X, hey, city of X, take over our road, will you? We're desperate, please. And there's a lot of pressure put on the community or put on the municipality to take over that road, even though they never really, it was never really dedicated to them to begin with. So, and yeah, that was really approved at their subdivision as a gravel road. It was approved. Our code was meant to do that. One thing is that final plat approval with no improvements or surety. As our almost every subdivision code that's been written since pretty much the 1940s. Before you sign off on a final plat, before the town or municipality signs off on a final plat, there either has to be infrastructure put in, or there has to be some kind of financial surety, like a bond
bond, yeah.
or cash in reserve, to say that, okay, we're going to enough to cover cost of building the infrastructure.
And
We don't,
we do have that. But there are examples in the town where
Yeah.
it didn't apply.
right, the code, one option that the subdivision code has is, okay, you don't put your subdivision on hold for 10 years, we'll sign off on the final plat. And we'll just say no building permits for the next 10 years until you get your lot, until you get your infrastructure in place. If it's not put in place in 10 years, we pretty much dissolve the subdivision. I haven't seen that anywhere else except Danby, and Danby subdivision regulations are based off of the town's
Town of
regulations.
Ithaca's, right?
Town of
Right.
Ithaca's
It's
regulations.
an unusual
It's a
situation.
very unusual
It's
situation.
usually an expiration or something in 36 months, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely needing improvement.
right. So that's an issue, it's because it's possible that you might get a road like that. It can be difficult to dissolve a subdivision or vacate a subdivision. And putting a building permit hold, may, or let's say if somebody legally challenged that, yeah, I don't know what would happen. So I'm sure, Susan has some case law, something like that, that might.
We don't need to get
happen,
into
but
it
we
now.
won't get too much into it. And then you know, we got the uncertainty of discretionary missing requirements.
Right,
So we didn't do, I might say we, I mean, you know, the town in general, when it came to any kind of previous amendments, changes to the code in the past to put in a lot more standards or a lot more detail about what do we want to see. Instead, we just said, if the planning board so chooses, or if the planning board so desires, it can ask for sidewalks, it can ask for X, it can ask for Y. So a developer coming in who, they want to know the rules.
yeah,
You might, you know, yeah, they don't like red tape, but they at least want to know what rules are in place, you know, that there's a sense of fairness and equity, that we're treating them the same way that we're treating subdivider Y, that we're treating subdivider Z. But when we have all these discretionary requirements, it's hard to uphold the same standards for, it seems like, you know, there's consistency between these different developments. There might not be much. Like I said, some subdivisions, you have the rural road profiles. Others, you have a little bit of sidewalk. Others, you might see gutters along the street, but there's really not much consistency. It's all negotiated. So. Oh. Yeah.
is this how we end?
No, there's a little bit more. It's like.
So what are comparable subdivision codes that we can look at?
I've got a whole bunch of them. I've got.
Ariel wants to see every single one of
You
them.
want to see every single one, and I've written some before, so have that, but.
Yeah, there are some great examples out there.
There's a lot of good
Mhm.
examples out there, but the thing is, again, this is a foundation from 1956, and it's gonna take a lot more than a bunch of amendments and a bunch of tweaks to really make this work. So what are we proposing? I'm just calling the subdivision code 2.0 for now. I'm sure maybe we can come up with a better name, and CJ might come up with something. You're a little bit more savvy than that.
I don't know about that.
Subdivision code 2.0. And it's like, you know, it's a split.
What will it do?
What will it do? Well, part of it, I'm gonna go a lot more into it next month, but we want it to be easy to use and administer, as, you know, less red tape for this very simple project. Some of the lot splits where you're not looking at, you know, adding on to frontage development, or where you're correcting an error that might have been made in the past, where you're shifting a lot line, or where there's really not much of an impact. But really, you know, spell out the process a lot more clearly than what we've got now, and give more certainty to what's out there. That means have more details in the regulations. Prevent wasting of land, as you know, try to work on creating better places to live, not just how are we going to cut up lots, but how are we going to build neighborhoods? And we do that in the new neighborhood code. Its subdivision regulations go into detail about creating better places to live. This is going to apply more towards conventional suburban development, cluster development, the areas that would be outside of, you know, the TND / new urbanist areas. And implement our comprehensive plan, implement Recoding Ithaca, which was a report that we did several years ago about the shortcomings in our zoning regulations and subdivision regulations on where we can do any kind of fixes or reforms. But we want to do is like incorporate where today's best practices and subdivision design, resource protection, make them part of town law. Not make them negotiable, but actually get them in our law so that we have a code that's worthy of having the title Town of Ithaca on the top of it. So next month, going to bring you more about subdivision 2.0, and that is it. So.
Wow. Vince.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey.
Subdivisions Vista.
Oh, God, no. It's like Windows. Oh, I remember Windows Vista. No. So that's really it. Let me stop the sharing and we'll get back to the show. Okay.
Back to the show.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions for Dan?
They're all wowed by.
Yeah, no, I just confirmed so many things that I
Okay.
knew was going on in the town. I know I have a deep lot.
Yeah,
The only positive is somewhat of a buffer, but it's just infested with ticks and
Right.
deer and I mean,
Yeah.
what's the point?
right. I think, yeah, it depends on your zoning. If your zoning, if your lot is, if you're in a LDR zoning district and your lot's 30,000, 40,000 square feet, that's fine. But if it's MDR and you've got a 2 acre lot, well, that's a little, what are you gonna use the tick breeding area for in the future? So,
And I was glad to know about this private road issue that, developers are gonna want to, spend as little money as possible. Obviously, to build a private road is gonna be cheaper than building one to specifications with tree lawns and sidewalks and such. And then make it the future's problem when it needs to be rededicated to the town. And
Exactly.
that's terrible.
You're exactly right. It's passing off the problems on to another generation. So with Amabel, things might be fine and dandy now with their gravel road, but what's going to happen 30 years from now after we're all gone? Hopefully, we're still alive, but after we're gone and the gravel road hasn't been maintained very well and it's full of potholes and residents are complaining and they come to the town and they say, please, can you pave it? So what,
Good point.
well,
Good point.
Thank you, Dan.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
So our task tonight is to review the work plan, CJ, would you say, or?
The scope of work, if we could take a look at this draft scope of work and any comments, edits, suggestions, things you'd like changed. This is an opportunity, it's not final opportunity, but we're gonna start moving into, assuming that the Codes and Ordinances Committee is satisfied with the scope of work, so kind of just our little way to say, this is how we're gonna do this project. And agree with the general direction, we'll start preparing a technical memo that really goes into the details, like Ariel's asking about sample codes and things like that, and provide more resources, and that will work on in concert with the other departments as well, to really start to flesh out some of the technical details and how we're gonna approach the draft. So this is an opportunity to say, oh, what is that policy issue, or what do you mean by that?
And CJ, you're referring to the project amendments to Town Code 234 subdivision of land draft that's dated May 3rd?
That's
in the
correct.
packet? Okay.
You got it. That's our scope of work for this particular project.
Yeah. So if the committee has any comments, insults, outcries,
And
suggested changes?
I mean, is this ambitious?
Good question. I would say for, do you mean relative to the
The-
tasks and the schedule?
Yeah, the deliverable.
The schedule, yes,
Yeah.
okay, then we can
I
look
have
at
no
page,
idea.
page 4, and I inadvertently labeled task and proposed committee schedule as 4, when it should be 5. So error on my part, and I'll fix it. I think that this, the schedule is proposed is both a little bit ambitious, but pretty realistic. Having worked as a consultant for some time, you have about 12 to 18 months to complete a project. You have to lay out the steps, of course, and the dependencies. But I would say for one of the big issues that we do want to engage with you all in the coming months would be identifying stakeholders, people you think that we really need to talk to in the community about development, about subdivisions, just beyond perhaps some of our usual suspects. And that will help us, reach out to those people as early as possible in the process. That's really, our goal, but. Yeah, I mean, I try to, and this is my particular approach to projects. It doesn't have to be everyone's, but I try to begin with an initial draft, just tends to be, a little rough and needs a little work around the edges. We'll give that to you for a little while. You'll have some time to reflect on that. Generally more than a month. We'd have some time to do some research and such. We then come back with you with a revised draft, keeping in mind, of course, kind of the winter, holiday kind of season and being mindful of that for an internal review cycle. And then presenting essentially a final draft or third iteration. Now, this is not intended to say, we will foreclose any further opportunity beyond that, but when people look at a timeline of a final deliverable in June of next year, that's more than a year away. Sometimes that can be daunting and kind of what's the delay. But the truth is, we want this to be the highest quality product we can possibly get. We want you guys to be engaged in developing this product as much as we possibly can in the time we have it. And we need a lot of feedback, especially internally in the town. We need to make sure all the departments are on board with us and how we're gonna go about this, because, planning is kind of, we're kind of setting the table, but the other, departments really where the rubber hits the road, and they're the ones that kind of have to live with some of these big decisions. So we really want them engaged in this iterative process as well. So yeah, I would say, yes, it's ambitious, but it's also, pretty couched, it's couched in pretty realistic expectations, I should think.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you've covered all the main points here. I can't imagine I have anything really to add to it. Does anybody else have anything that you think hasn't been covered that's jumping out right now? Or, sure, more will come to light in subsequent meetings.
I just really appreciate the strategic approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
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 And there's no need necessarily for action on this. If you want to formally approve it, kind of make a statement of this is, how we'd like to proceed. We can certainly do that at the June meeting. There's no pressure, please don't feel any pressure right now to say, okay, we commit to this. We can start on the technical work without necessarily formally approving it.
I think it'd be good to allow everybody on the committee some time to think it over before the next meeting, before we approve it.
Absolutely.
If that's okay with everybody.
It's okay.
I mean, you can obviously keep working, but maybe somebody is gonna see something that they want to tweak.
Yeah, of course, and that's why we wanted to give enough time also. And so next month we'll work on some larger visioning and also some conceptual storyboards. And Dan did something sort of similar tonight, trying to introduce the project. And so we'll go into it a little bit more detail and a little bit of a study session based on and start to develop the technical memo that's going to go with that. This will give you a lot of different resources that you can explore further yourself too, so that you understand kind of how we're approaching best practices. And if you really want to dig into the weeds, proverbial weeds with us, you're welcome to do so. So.
Perfect.
Perfect, yeah. So is there anything else on the agenda for tonight?
The only other thing on the agenda is other business where you get to talk about meeting dates and
Okay,
times and all that.
meeting
fun
dates,
stuff.
right, future dates and times. So the usual pattern is on a Wednesday night in the middle of the month. Is
The
it
second Wednesday of every month. The time has been 5:30 to 7:30. So there is a question as to whether you want it to stay the second Wednesday of every month, whether you want it to
I
stay.
don't have any
the
strong
times.
feelings about this right now.
Okay,
It wasn't always the second Wednesday because it's the same week as the town board meeting. It's just
Yeah, so interesting. It's also the same day each month as the 2-hour sewer committee meeting. One person at the sewer plant, so there's travel time involved. So in a way, and it's the same week as a town board meeting. So in a way, it's good because I sometimes travel out of town for work. And having everything clumped together actually is kind of good because it frees up blocks of time.
Yeah.
So, and even just having this whole day was dominated by the sewer committee. and planning
You just
committee,
have meetings all.
It's
one
just
day.
kind of like it encapsulates it and I don't know, I don't have any need to change it. And it does have that feature that you pointed out where everything's jammed together, but not necessarily bad.
True.
Well, we want to make this something to look forward to, not, make this really more exciting than the sewer committee, so.
Yeah.
Any suggestions that you can offer?
I was gonna say that.
I think it should bring
Bring-
something to look forward to,
Yeah.
I think that we're all here because we want to be here. And it should be a good discussion of some interesting improvements.
So maybe we keep the same meeting dates and times then?
The only thing I'm wondering about is the 90-minute meeting versus the 2-hour meeting.
Okay,
People have, Eric expressed that it felt like a very long meeting. It really felt like a long meeting to me too, I'm a veteran of a lot of meetings. I was on the zoning board for 10 years and it did seem very long and it got almost difficult to stay present near the end. And you expressed that, Eric, and I know you're a very experienced person. And I felt the same thing.
Yeah, it's, we get into the weeds and the minutia in the meeting, and so a long meeting combined with that level of detail does tend to
Yeah.
at times stand
Understood.
still a little bit. But I have to say, it has improved since we changed it to 5:30, when this meeting used to start
I
at
think it was like
7:30.
7 or 7:30.
Yeah, because Jonathan Cantor wanted to go home, have dinner, and then come back.
You're right.
What was that?
The two planners.
2 planning directors ago,
Yeah,
Jonathan Cantor.
I didn't
Yeah.
know.
so. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm an empty nester, so being home for dinner isn't an issue for me. We eat at 8:30, if we feel like it, or 9 o'clock. But definitely if you have children, being home for dinner is an issue, not an issue for me.
No, it's not. It's always better to get home earlier, I mean,
Yeah, it gets you home earlier.
yeah.
If you wanna have it earlier in the day, is that what I
It is.
do?
Daytime meeting,
Like 4 or?
that creates other kinds of problems
Okay,
for
yeah.
people with full-time jobs like Eric and me.
Of course.
Yeah, I'll say this, it's,
Mario.
my wife has CrossFit on Wednesday night, so this is ideal. It's like
From
all,
the staff
from a
perspective.
staff perspective, I'll get home about, same time that she gets home.
Mhm.
So if we have it at 90 minutes or 2 hours, so.
Mhm.
That's really.
So it sounds like Wednesday evening is fine
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah.
Marty, is it okay
I
for
didn't
you?
know
Yeah. Here, this is your life.
And everyone's still comfortable with 5:30 or are you? I think I'm hearing the committees
I'm okay with
Maybe they
that.
wanna
It's
stick with
better to get it
5:30.
over with. And
just be done at 7.
Be done.
that. Yeah, 5:30 to stop.
So we
Okay.
make it this, be done at 7?
I am here
Yeah.
for that.
Oh, okay, there's no resistance. So
No, in fact, okay, if we need, if it runs it over additional time, of course, as chair, you can kind of check in with everyone, see how everyone's feeling. Do they want to just keep plowing through the draft? But we're gonna try some strategies to make the reviews, fairly expeditious, give enough time for reviews in the middle and try to make sure the drafts, the 3 drafts that we submit to you are pretty tight. So I think that we could do 90 minutes. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, the only concern I have is that the idea of running over is fine, but it's maybe not fair to people who then plan their daily calendar around a 90-minute meeting. Whereas if you have a 2-hour meeting but end early, then everybody gets free time, but.
It helps if you talk a little faster. That might-
Yeah.
I mean, it's
CJ,
7 now, we're at
you-
90 minutes.
Yeah,
Does this
just back up to
feel
1.5
like,
speed.
like,
Because it's covered enough, we need to digest.
yeah,
Feels like
What we got here. Okay.
exactly. And I think that we may spend, say, more than 1 month on the draft, which is why we've given ourselves a nice buffer of the review cycle. So if, say if we're getting to 9 o'clock, we've only gotten halfway through and of the segment that we wanted to make it through, and we're gonna try to, there's a couple ways we're gonna try to make it so digestible pieces for you. We call it and we, can do some, discussion, I think via email is okay. If there's finer points people wanted to discuss, I would feel.
Email is good, right?
Comfortable with that. I mean, if assuming it didn't, stretch on for. Eons, or where you're trying to make decisions via email, I certainly wouldn't, recommend
No,
that.
let's not do that. Like,
But we would
nobody
bring
has to answer the. If there's email going out, nobody should feel that they have to respond to it or jump onto it.
Please
Right.
don't feel that
Right.
way, that you have to.
That's for the meeting. Nothing will be done by email.
Right,
That's a
but,
decision.
but if there's a robust conversation, say we're talking about something and, maybe discussion wants to keep going or learn more resources about it. That's something we could keep the discussion up with the committee via email after the meeting and the days following without, continuing to run over. Now, I defer to you all, have been here a long time and I want to do what you feel comfortable
Now,
with.
I know you've become very experienced and highly regarded, and you were supportive of the 90-minute meeting. And I'm not stopping that.
Fair.
I'm good with it. Do we have general consensus on it?
Yes.
I don't think you're gonna hear someone say that you want the meetings to go longer.
If what?
I said, I don't think you're gonna hear anyone say that they want the meetings to go
All right,
longer.
then, let's plan for 90 minutes.
90 minutes. I just, I will let Abby know that she should update the online calendar so that it says 5:30 to 7 PM.
Okay,
And we'll need to move, we'll need to be prepared, to look at the drafts and, be prepared to comment. At the meetings, and so we're gonna do our best to turn things around. Rob and I spoke about this, to request that the materials go out 1 week in advance. So our mail date will then be the Wednesday before, and that's gonna be a little bit of change for us administratively to step it up a day. But we're gonna do that to make sure you have a full week for review.
So that means anything that needs to come to us for mail out would have a deadline of Tuesday
Yeah.
Got it.
at noon.
It would be, yeah, and
before.
ideally, I'd like to get stuff Monday, so you have a couple of days to prepare, just in case, any kind of revisions, things like that, but Tuesday we can
That's
do it.
mostly an internal
Yeah.
staff note and for attorney.
Mhm.
and one good thing about this committee is opposed to like the zoning board. And probably the budget committee too, is it doesn't have the kind of time urgency that some of those other.
That's what you think.
Planning.
It really depends on what the regulations are.
Yeah.
Depending on what
Having
happens,
to craft a new regulation under time pressure.
Yeah, that does
Oh,
happen.
Okay,
so every now and then you will have that.
Yep,
then we might have to have like,
energy code supplement revisions that have to
Okay,
happen
okay.
before January 1st. Yeah,
oh,
That sort of
okay,
thing.
that's a good example.
Right, so sometimes you will, not all the time, but just as a forewarning.
Okay, so something like that comes up, CJ will prioritize it.
Yeah, we'll shift our schedules around, but that's again why we tried to make sure we buffered in enough time to make sure that we're
Okay.
giving, we're basically leaving a little room for these kind of, what I call, they're kind of a fun pop-up. I'm trying to make it, these things that arise and that we, planning tries to anticipate what we can and, but something.
Yeah.
Don't always see coming. So.
Okay, then. Yeah.
So the next meeting is June 12th?
well, before you move on to that, another very important other business item on the agenda is digital packets versus paper mailouts. A number of our boards and committees have attempted to go as digital as possible. And we hadn't really presented that option to the COC yet. So we'd like to know how many of you really want paper copies of materials? And how many of you are comfortable with doing digital?
The paper copy was super helpful for me tonight.
Okay.
I grew up in the era before keyboards. And I'm not really keyboard literate, and when I do use a keyboard, I use a big keyboard. and a
Okay.
Mouse, and trying to take notes quickly on this little laptop with like 6 different pages open is difficult.
Okay.
So I would appreciate the paper copy.
You still want paper? How about you, Ariel?
No.
No paper, okay.
Wow, wow.
Chris, no paper? Eric?
I'm generally paperless. These packets are pretty thin, so I never really cared, like the town board is just.
Sometimes
And
really.
I've never gotten paper, but, I don't really need it, I suppose, but.
We have made copies for you on the fly in the past.
That, yeah,
This has your number.
all right, I guess it might be helpful.
Okay, and then I will, sorry.
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
will ask, Bill Goodman and then Eva another time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have at least three, two and a half votes for digital.
And if that
Good to know.
changes, I could, like, I'm all electronic for the town board too, because,
You get a lot more from,
Yes,
for
you
the
get a
town
lot
board than
more.
you do for COC.
and I'm not the chair. I mean, if I was this Rod, I might be wanting to write things down, but.
Right. All right. Thank you. This is
Can we
good
get
information.
I'm hoping you have all this in a SharePoint repository,
Okay,
right?
absolutely.
Maybe? I
We
don't know.
can,
Well,
we don't always.
Oh, okay.
But, I was
We'll use
wondering about the-
OneDrive.
exactly, yeah, we have SharePoint and we can certainly. That's another kind of interesting conversation that maybe we want to have on the next agenda.
Oh,
Is talking about kind of our comment cycle and how we're gonna accept those comments. Because with SharePoint, we can set it up so that you all could comment directly on the digital document rather than
Right.
bringing up, marked up copies. So that's not a very common practice in the town, I would say, as it stands right now. So
SharePoint can be a huge mess trying to use it. I have to say, it can be a nightmare keeping the
Tech
versions
versus
under
tech.
control, giving everybody access.
yes,
Well, everybody can access it as a commenter and not an editor.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you have to have that kind of control over it.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, that
I'll-
can do.
Well, I'll say this, if everybody is working on one document with SharePoint. And for me, dealing with red line documents, when I have, like a bunch of different digital red line documents that I have to incorporate into one master red line document, but leave out what so-and-so said over here and try to get comments from, I think it would be a lot easier than
SharePoint would be better than.
having to deal with, like the show changes, red lines, like that. They
I'm
had 6,
okay.
7 different
Yeah, I'm
people
okay
merging
with
them
it.
all together.
It definitely is better than dealing with lots of different marked up Word files.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I'm okay with it as long as like you're aware of like administering it, like,
Mhm.
yes.
it's gonna be. Another thing.
Yeah, the file hierarchy and how the project is set up
Mhm.
is what we're gonna go into next. That's how we'll, our next.
I think
one.
that's good. I think that's fine. It's easy to make comments.
But we welcome, I wanna be clear though, that we do welcome the paper comments. So if you wanna bring in a marked up version with
Yeah.
a red pen, green, black,
Whatever it
whatever it is that you like,
Right.
that's no problem. I just
Right.
wanna be clear that we
Yeah.
want the feedback.
I mean, one thing people should be aware of with those kind of SharePoint things is that anything you do is permanent, and it's public record, I assume, right? And you're gonna like say this developer
Susan
stops or
Brock might
something
have
like that,
something.
Sure, we have to, I'd have to ask Paulette about the LGSO one. That's a records management question, and maybe it'd be good to have a conversation with Paulette, our records management officer, about what her preferences are.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you comment respectfully and be aware that it's a permanent public record.
I would hope
Write a
that would
rough
go without
draft
saying.
To yourself.
So is it like if somebody makes a comment and says, you know what, never mind that comment, I'm gonna delete that comment, can't you do that?
I'm not sure,
Mm.
actually. I'm not sure if it really
Do you
gets
know,
deleted,
Ariel?
or if it stays as a record of changes.
It depends.
Yeah,
It depends.
because
right?
Yeah.
So
you,
that's another thing we have to decide.
yeah, I
Can
mean,
we permanently delete comments if somebody decides they didn't really mean that? Or is it a permanent log of everything,
Mhm.
every thought that somebody logged on at 2 a.m?
I would
I
defer to
agree.
council on an answer about that, but I think it would have to do with Boyle and, working agency documents. I defer to Susan.
I don't really know. I'm gonna be I would be very careful. I would compose my comments offline first. and Put them in there,
Susan, you're unmuted. So what have you got to say?
Under foil, inter and intra-agency documents are not disclosable. So if there is, an internal working document like that, I don't think it would necessarily be disclosable.
Okay, good to know.
The types of things that you might have to do or if it has data or final instructions to staff or things like that, there's some exceptions to that, but there, it just depends on what the document is and what's in it. But
Okay.
a lot of the sort of deliberative discussions probably would not be, is my guess. I need to take a look at FOIL again, but that's just my off the cuff response. As far
Yeah.
as the town's requirement to maintain the records, just setting aside FOIL, that is a records management issue. The state archives has a schedule for retention of records. And Paulette probably has a lot more information about what the duration of the retention would be.
Exactly. And that's, in terms of the interagency communication, that's to kind of help with the chilling effect of people kind of basically doing this, the deliberation in a room and not necessarily, wanting people to be able to speak freely. Would you characterize it that way?
Yes, I mean, if you're in a room and you've got a quorum, then that's a public meeting and that's a different issue and that needs to be public noticed and open to the public. But, in terms of comments, being shared in written form, that is the purpose, so that people can have open and frank discussions without necessarily having that discussion, disclosed under FOIL.
Just quickly, Susan,
You mean the meetings are under FOIL, but the working documents aren't?
No, the meetings, a meeting is not a record. A meeting is a meeting. So the meetings are subject to the open meetings law.
Which means
And
that,
if you have a public body, and there's a definition for that is, and you've got a quorum, and they're
Yeah.
discussing public business, then that has to be open to the public. Those are, people who are convening together. So if you have a quorum of people, that would be a meeting. So what I was talking about are documents or records. That's the Freedom of Information law that governs that.
okay.
So there are two different
Two
laws.
different laws.
You've got open meetings law that has to do with the gathering of this public body and how it's carrying out public business, right? And then you've got freedom of information law, which governs any kind of town records, documents.
Okay, so I think commenting on a SharePoint, on a Word document in SharePoint and comments only, or is it a PDF? With comments only?
It's, we can give you a couple options in terms of that, but, we probably want to keep, one file version of it. So then if we had to revert for whatever reason, we could go back to an earlier version. And also, to
What do you
keep
mean by
everyone's-
that, like a backup on the server from
Yeah,
each day?
or version control, basically, so that we can see all the changes over time. So version 1 point, whatever, you can, for some reason the file was corrupted or something,
Mhm.
go back to original version, and then we can also see, it can also be a singular standalone document. Instead of, Word file subdivision _ 42503,
Right,
final.
right, it's
Yeah,
one document, it's a
CJ5.
living document. in other words.
You got it. So, we can talk about, the different approaches and what you all prefer, but we do have SharePoint access. We do have this capacity and we're happy to deploy it as you see fit.
Sounds efficient,
Hmm,
yeah,
We have a moment.
perfect.
if it's managed well. Like I said, some teams, like people just start emailing stuff anyway, and they don't upload it to SharePoint, and the latest thing isn't on SharePoint, and somebody doesn't have it, and
Yeah,
then
we'll be mindful.
it can just be like an extra layer of aggravation that doesn't really work if it's not done right.
Hmm.
If people start, as I said, especially emailing things outside of SharePoint.
Okay, all right, well
Okay,
then,
so next meeting is good.
next, yep,
Setting the agenda, CJ, you're gonna do that?
I was going to just set up a time with you where we just go through it and
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have our monthly.
just a little
Meeting.
15-minute
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you want, just
looking
to,
forward to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, great.
so this meeting, I don't think, Susan, you can correct me, but I don't think you need a motion to adjourn this meeting, but,
Motion to
but-
adjourn.
but if
Well,
you,
But before you do, I just want to second what Eric said earlier in the meeting, Chris, about you, and your service to the COC. It's been spectacular, and I
God.
know I probably will still be working with you on other matters, but,
You will.
I'll really miss you on the COC. You've just been an incredible asset to the committee, and, yeah, I'm sorry to see you go.
Thank you, Susan. You'll see me again.
Yeah.
I know.
second you also.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
You've been brought a lot of
It's
energy.
been
And,
great. It really has been great working with everybody.
You'll be here next month.
I'll be here next month.
and you're still in the planning department, you're just not coming to these meetings.
Yeah, unless,
I understood that.
I've had a 23-year standing resignation with the town that if I win the lottery, I'm quitting, but, otherwise, I'm
All right.
still in the planning department.
Okay,
I'll be
good.
serving the town board, the planning board, and most of the committees, so.
And Chris will be obviously available as needed, so
Yeah.
there's no, she's gonna help advise and craft the.
You all know where I sit.
You know what you're-
They say it'll take a little while to get up to speed, so everything is smooth and things, I'm not feeling so awkward and anxious, but. Hopefully.
You'll get there.
Get there.
That's right. Well,
Good,
thank you
you've
all.
got- You've got a good role model to follow.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. All right,
All right, then.
so
we'll
we're
adjourn.
done. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.